Welcome. This is our fireside chat on the Dutch MedTech system. We're thrilled to have you all here. We're going to go through introductions in a second. Probably each of us sort of introducing ourselves here. But first of all, I just want to welcome you all. And we know we have a Zoom audience here as well. My name is Steve Parenti. This is part of the Medical Industry Leadership Institute Valuation Laboratories web chat series that we run every month. This is a fireside chat, usually associated with whether or not the ice is out on Lake Minnetonka. It has actually gone out, but it is still rather chilly outside. So we're sticking with fireside as opposed to our summer tradition, which will start next month of dockside chats. So much more exciting. One thing to mention is our normal custom is an hour-long program where we have 30 minutes of on the record with the Zoom component of it. We feel with the Dutch here that we need to practice full disclosure. So we are now going to have everything on the record, the full 1 hour. What we're going to have is just a Q&A session amongst us. It's very conversational. That the PowerPoint slide that you see there will never change, pretty much, unless there's like some other QR code for advertisements. We're not going to do a PowerPoint deck or anything like that. It'll stay conversational with Tom Gunderson, my partner in crime here. And then we're going to throw it open to the audience as well as the folks in Zoom as well. So just for the folks participating in Zoom, make sure you raise your hand in Zoom, and then you actually will be given a online ability to talk to the whole room, be the voice of God here, which is, and then for those that want to ask questions that are in the room, we have a roving microphone where Jessica has one, I think, in the back there, Jessica Howe, and also, thank you, person two. Thank you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the baton over to my co-host, Tom Gunderson, who will kick us off for what I hope be and promise to be a great conversation.
Thanks, Steve. I'm Tom Gunderson, and Steve already said what we're doing here. So nobody came to see Steve and I talk. They came to see our stars talk. So we'll get to that right off the bat. First thing, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, we'll do a couple of introductions. And the other is, when we do this on Zoom, it's very tight in that questions come in the second part of it. This is open. You guys came here with questions, interrupt us. This is a chat. And what makes it more interesting for everybody, including you, is if you participate. And that's what we're going to do. So with that, I'm just going to leave it to you guys to introduce yourselves, give us a little bit about who you are, what you've done, and then if you can swing in just a little bit about the contingent that came to Minnesota this week.
Sure. Shall I kick off?
Go ahead.
Great. So my name is Jasper from Weerd. I'm a father of one very interesting little boy. I'm a biomedical engineer by training. And first, I would like to acknowledge all the great people from the Netherlands that are part of this delegation. So I think there's a lot of cool innovation being developed in the Netherlands, a lot of disruptive MedTech innovation. And I think a lot of these companies are represented here. So please do reach out to them as well and connect, because I think there's many future opportunities that we can co-develop. So I did my studies as a bachelor in applied science. I come from a family with nobody actually working in science. I was a bit of an oddball in that regard. And then I became an entrepreneur. And my entrepreneurial flame became lit when I did my bachelor's graduation project in a small startup company. So I never was exposed to entrepreneurship and a biotech startup. And I was working there and was truly intrigued by the CEO, who with his own technology was able to build a business, attract clients, like, oh, wow, that would be really cool if in the future I could pursue that same path. But I still had the feeling that there was much more knowledge to be learned. So I continued my studies, did a master in biomedical engineering, a PhD in supramolecular chemistry. It was all back in the beginning of the 2010s. And then 2016, I started the company Lipocoat. That was born, the idea was born during my PhD. In a nutshell, we develop coatings. We're a medical device coating developer. We do the design, development, and manufacturing of medical device coatings. And they're primarily aimed at improving patient comfort, safety, and performance. And we do this by mimicking the outside of a human cell as a surface coating, and that yields a surface that doesn't collect a lot of bacterial contamination, but it's also very friendly for blood environment and a tissue environment. That's what we've been doing since 2016. We've recently closed an agreement with Reyes Medevio, who's close by. So we're very happy with that, and we hope that will be our first foothold in the States. And on the European side of things, we have certified our first product for use on contact lenses. And I think there's a lot of work still to be done. And I hope our introduction into this ecosystem will give us also a lot of new opportunities and also engage and expand with the network here.
Yeah. So I thought coming here, we would have an away game, but looking here, I think it feels more like a home game. I think if we get into a brawl, I think the Dutch will win. Just looking at the heads here. But no, it's great to be here. It really is. It's been a great tour so far. Talking to a lot of people that maybe I'd seen once or twice, but as we have our 3-4 days together, we are also getting to know each other very well. So in fact, that might be one of the greatest outcomes of going far away, is that you actually get to know the people who are quite close to you much better. Having said that, no, it's been very impressive, I think, so far to be here with this region. I've never been here. I've traveled a lot in the US, but it's very, very impressive what
Thanks so much. Hello?
Medical device.
Hello? Yep.
As well.
Questions
honestly
for the
think
speaker?
so.
Yes.
So about myself, I'm a father of 3. So the youngest one just left the home, so we're empty nesters. I actually was trained as a theoretical physicist, which is quite useless in daily life, right? My engineers keep telling me I can't hold a hammer, so you know it's no good really. But then I never made my career out of physics. I fairly quickly after an MBA went into business, and I always like to compare and contrast the two. Physics, of course, it's very much a complex science with deep math and what have you. But business is also very complex, but in a very different way. And I always like to the concepts in business are very simple. You know, there's revenue, there's cost, there's a P&L, you have customers, etc. You fabricate a product, you sell it for a price, blah, blah. So the concept is very simple, unlike some concepts in physics. But it's bloody hard to find out what are the few things that you can actually influence and manage that are really going to make the difference. So out of 100, 1,000, 1 million rabbits you can chase, what are the 3, 5, 7 max rabbits you can actually chase? And this is for me intriguing about business.
Jeff, did I see you had a question?
To try and learn that puzzle, and I'm still learning today. And the combination of great technology and this business puzzle, I find in a small startup environment, working with very motivated, smart people is fantastic. I love it. What do we make? We actually make something. We make a patch, a wearable, large, flexible patch. You stick it on the chest. It consists of ultrasound transducers, sensors, and we continuously monitor the mechanical performance of the heart as a pump. So you're talking about cardiac output as opposed to electrical signals, for which there are quite a lot of sensors and wearables. But I will say electrical function and mechanical performance are 2 different things. And so look at the lights in the ceiling. And so the first question to me, well, is there actually electric current going to the lamp, which is relevant? But ultimately, you want to know how much light actually comes out. And that's what we measure with our device. Yeah, we've been on the road for 4 years. We still have 3-4 years to go till our first product to market. I really miss having customers. I really miss that. A customer is the heart of a business, in my view, and we won't have one for still several years to come. So it's not all glory, but it's an amazing experience. I love it.
Thanks. So one of the things that we want to do with this
That's a real challenge.
discussion,
You know,
this chat,
that's right, yeah.
is to compare and
Okay, so
contrast
let's
what
thank our speaker
what-
one more time.
the people
you
who
so
are
much,
on
Aaron.
Zoom, people who
Now I'd like to
associated with
introduce
really-
Tam Nguyen
really
from
good
North Dakota
sense
State
of,
University, and he'll talk about surrogate
what
models
it
of blood
takes
flow
to get a
dynamics
product
and brain
through
aneurysms
the
using
US
dynamic
system.
bone
And my
decomposition.
guess is that there are
Yeah, thank you.
several similarities to the European system or Belgium or the Netherlands. But just to make sure, I used my new best friend, ChatGPT, and asked ChatGPT over the weekend, what are the 3 biggest issues for startup MedTech companies in Europe? And it came back extraordinarily well written. Grammar was perfect. And the outcome was maybe predictable, but anyhow, there are 3 that I summarized out of what Chat told me. Number 1 is regulation. Number 2 was funding. And number 3 was access to expertise. And maybe you guys can, I don't know if we do a real people versus chat slam down kind of thing, but what's your reaction to that, of those 3 issues?
I would say the first 2 are extremely recognizable. I think everybody's heard in Europe that we have gone through a regulation change, that we have the MDR enforced. I think that has caused a lot of uncertainties. And I think especially for smaller companies like ours, this is a burden that is really challenging to tackle. Long lead times, unexpected long timelines, finding notified bodies, all of this has become extremely difficult, I must say. Regarding the funding part, and maybe Iwan can share the same experience, I think in the Netherlands, we're quite well equipped to take a academic technology to the first proof of concept. I think we have a lot of funding instruments provided through regional and national agencies that allow you as a researcher to train yourself as an entrepreneur, to explore the market, to get a first prototype in place, to get the first seed funding. But where we see a huge gap is when you have your first proof of product, but you don't have your regulatory affairs in order yet. You still have to find your clients, you still need to work your manufacturing, you can list a whole heap of things. And your pre-revenue, most importantly, then finding investors that can help you further, that's a real challenge. And I think we have nurtured our ecosystem really well on the seed and Series A side. But on the Series B side, there's much to be improved, especially in MedTech. I would say pharma is a bit of a different story in the Netherlands. Growth funding, on the other hand, I believe is quite well organized. So there's a big gap. I feel in the States, it might be a bit more accessible to larger amounts of funding. We've struggled with that personally a lot. So you often hear when you start a startup, you have a valley of death. Well, there are multiple valleys of death. So when you traverse one, then you fall down the next and the next and the next. And funding is really a big limiting factor. And when you're talking about regulatory, this is a huge cost burden as well. You need to decide at which point do you want to invest in your regulatory affairs, putting a QMS in place, and this takes away resources from your product development. And having funding, of course, is critical to do so. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg story. And when reaching out to MedTech companies who are, most likely in our cases, our clients, they always ask, do you have your clinical data? Do you have your animal data? And like that. We're working on that. That's a big challenge. I would say, I think the third one was expertise or
Access.
Access. I think in the Netherlands, we're the exception. We have a wealth of expertise, so maybe that's in other countries the case. But in the Netherlands, I would say we do have access to a lot of experts, a lot of know-how, especially on the technology development part. So I think we're quite innovative also on an international level. So I don't really agree with ChatGPT on the third one, but the first 2 I truly support.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would say 2 out of 3 correct.
Same 2.
Same 2, yes, yes. And indeed, on funding is a roller coaster. It's a bit like being on Tinder. I'm not on Tinder, by the way. For the record.
Yeah, for the record, it's very important.
Yeah. Please note, I'm not on Tinder, but sometimes it feels like if I was on Tinder, what am I trying to say? You have to deal with a lot of rejection, and that is funding. You have to use another analogy. You have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your princess. So So it's really tough. Well, I believe we have a fantastic, not only product, we're very proud of the technology and blah, 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 but we also really, I know in my heart, we can really save people's lives. I was this is my third rodeo, my third MedTech startup. And I remember in my first one, we were developing a product for several years, and then we got it to the market, etc. And then one of the first customers, patients who used our device, it was a UV light therapy device. This was a woman. She had eczema, and UV light can help reduce symptoms of eczema. And I talked to her over the phone, and she said, Iwan, I have not had an itch for the first time in 10 years. Do you know what that means? And I still remember that conversation. And wow, that is so inspiring. And I tell my people, guys, this is what we're after. So ultimately, yes, developing cool stuff, making money, yes, we all want to get rich, et cetera, but it's really about having that impact in people's lives. So that gets me up in the morning. But of course, it costs a lot of money, long timelines. And so, yeah, you have to talk to a lot of parties. And indeed, that's where being in a small country, the Netherlands, is a disadvantage. The pockets are not nearly as deep. And there aren't as many parties. And there's also, I would say, compared to here, I think there's more a mentality of let's play not to lose rather than let's play to win big. And I think that I really like that about America. It's a lot about, or more, I think, here about how can we win big? Let's bet big. If we lose, we move on. And where I'm from, it's more like, well, one step at a time. And sometimes I find it difficult.
Go ahead.
So my question goes into a little bit, actually kind of dwelling on it. When you think about anybody who's really developing a med technology product, whether anywhere, there usually is, not one country, it's usually a global market you're trying to hit. So from a Netherlands perspective, if you think about these technologies, where are the top countries that you want to sell into, or you think about, both in terms of what you might have to do with regulatory barrier, because that it's different depending on where you go from country to country, but also just more directly back to what ChatGPT had on point 2, where are you going to find your money in terms of funding and or reimbursement for that?
Yeah, well, I think it pains me to say this, but I think Trump is going to be right. America first. So I think the MDR will drive, unfortunately, a lot of European innovation first to the US, because it has been such a hurdle to get through the MDR. And many small companies are really struggling with that. We have been quite fortunate on the funding side to have attracted US capital. We have an angel investor from Boston who really, as you also mentioned, he really looked at our business case completely differently. So in the Netherlands, I think it's fair to say we have a Calvinistic mindset, a really risk-based decision-making. So we have a investment plan, for example, wherein we wanted to develop Lipocoat for lenses, for catheters, for implants, for a whole heap of devices in parallel. We thought this was a great idea, but the investors all disagreed it was a great idea, Dutch investors, and they said, well, just focus on just the rigid lenses first, and you can have a very small team. And when you are successful, then you may consider something else, but first get to your break even in a very cost-effective manner. We were like, no, we don't want to do that. We have our reasons why we parallel want to develop multiple products. And then we encountered this investor. It was a really nice surprise that he looked at it and said, wow, you have all these opportunities. Can you convert all these opportunities to a successful outcome with the funding that you're currently raising? And I do see that you're working on many different applications. This could be a risk that you lose focus. So what do we need to do that you can ensure that all these multiple opportunities can be successfully nurtured towards an endpoint? And what do you need to do in your organization to manage that? So then the story changed completely, that we raised more capital with this US investor taking the lead. And that has brought along a lot of Dutch angel investors in his slipstream. So we're quite happy with how the US mentality worked out for us.
If you had to pick a second country after after the
I
US.
think most logically, every European startup would very much like to launch their products in the European market first. But I think the MDR is making that extremely difficult. I think in our particular case, we're also looking very closely to Southeast Asia,
Mhm.
just due to the partners that we have there. So for Lipocoat's case, it will be Taiwan first, and then we're gonna move to a US market.
I think for us, I agree. Yeah, so USA first. Within Europe, we actually had some market access study done, 5 European countries, and it turned out that France was actually #1. Any French people in the room here? No? Okay, so I'll be honest. Now, that's not the easiest market, right? Because of language and culture, etc. But what is interesting there is they have a central model where one basically Paris decides, right? What is accepted, what is not, and price, etc. And that is actually, once you get to over the culture and language barrier, makes business really relatively attractive.
Mhm.
So you have to look at each and every country in Europe separately, and the parameters can be very different. And that makes it difficult, of course, because you start to cut up what 400 million people plus into smaller pieces, and it makes you have to address them all separately, basically. And that's a shame. The other thing I would add is China. Oh, by the way, there is a China is geopolitically now very difficult, but it is a very attractive from, if you look at unmet medical need, obviously a huge population. There's a lot of people there who have real money, so willingness to pay, etc. So it's very tough. We're actually having some conversation with Chinese partners, and we're like, yeah, that's great, but geopolitics also for us gets a little bit in the way.
I actually, I'm glad you're mentioning that, because I am approximately, I'd say about 13 hours away from boarding a plane to China. So
Okay.
I'll carry your message along. But
Yeah.
but I'll make a comment about it. I wanted a question in the back here from Art.
Yes, I'm wondering along the
Please
same.
introduce yourself for the
Yeah.
web audience.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Art Erdman, I'm in mechanical engineering department and also on the executive committee of this conference. My question was with regard to manufacturing. So from prototype to pre-commercial to your end goal manufacturer, are you looking locally in your country or in Europe or in the United States or somewhere else? And what are the advantages and disadvantages?
I was gonna ask a similar question because I think you're doing manufacturing in Japan. Is that right? I have a partner in Japan.
Yeah, we have for a
It's not my first guess. It wasn't Art's
yeah,
first guess.
yeah,
either.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're very well informed. So for our the sensor, which is the heart of the innovation, we make the same ultrasound sensor that's been around for decades. That's being used in the handheld devices. But we make them in a very different technology, so-called flat panel display technology. So I think the big TVs, etc. And we found the perfect partner in Japan. That's a long story, but there was nobody there. Such infrastructure and fab that we're looking for does not exist in Europe. It does not exist in the US. It basically only exists in what is the birthplace of flat panel display technology, which is Japan. So we have a critical component supplier and a strategic relationship with them in Japan. To the question of the gentleman, I would, as a starting company with the first product, if you can have your assembly or manufacturing done very close by, because you're going to run into a lot of startup problems. And the volumes are not going to go like that, right? Because you need to convince each and every doctor. And so I would start locally, and then, of course, when business grows, you find maybe a US partner who can do the same.
I fully agree. And this is also something that we've done at Lipocoat. So we've outfitted our own lab facilities to enable us to produce a 2x amount for our current customer that we're well equipped to provide the first lens manufacturer. I think it's also good to do that, also from a QMS perspective, that you can work your procedures, which you anyway need to transfer to a manufacturing site. And we're also heavily reliant on foreign parties to provide us with the raw goods. Funny enough, we switched from a Japanese supplier to a German supplier not so long ago. But I fully agree. If you can keep it close by, it's really handy, because you have to be able to switch and connect quickly when you are doing your first manufacturing runs. And I think doing that abroad might complicate things further.
Is there another question?
If I combine
Go ahead.
a couple of the questions and answers here, you want to come to the United States, but you manufacture elsewhere, and that does complicate things when you're trying to go through the FDA. What was it about the manufacturers that you chose that overrode those concerns?
I think in our specific case, we are looking more and more to do US-based manufacturing. Hence, our visit here is to meet up with partners. In our case specifically, the local manufacturing, for the arguments you just raised, to have it close by is handy. And our first production site to which we deliver our coating solution is also based in the Netherlands. So we didn't have these concerns at all. But it's a valid point. So I think when you are serious in establishing a US foothold, I think you need to consider your whole supply chain, your whole manufacturing. And I think if you want to do it, you need to do something here in the States as well. And I think it holds for any territory that you want to really conquer with your technology.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I have nothing further to add.
So I guess one thing, I want to go back to the ChatGPT thing for 1 second. So we 2 out of the 3, great. Last one, not so much. If you had one that you'd want to throw in that hasn't been mentioned, in terms of things that you need to be successful or think about in the Netherlands to get MedTech to go, what might that be?
I would say I'm really impressed by the American mindset. It looks like entrepreneurship or having an entrepreneurial mindset is baked into your DNA. I think there's much that we can learn from that. So I think if you look at academic research in the Netherlands, which is like the breeding ground for many of the future innovations, I think the Netherlands, but also Europe, could benefit from a more entrepreneurial mindset. And I think there's also a lot of room to improve our tech transfer process. So really taking the first indications of a promising technology to market. I think having more entrepreneurial awareness among researchers, having a very streamlined tech transfer process, I think that's one of the things that would be really helpful, and to move away a bit from our Calvinistic mindset.
Yeah, I think to me, and I've already alluded to it, it's this lack of scale and in all these different markets that really makes it so much harder to compete. And ultimately, we will compete on a world scale. What I found very striking is yesterday was a gentleman from Medtronic, actually a Dutch person who's been here for a longer time. He said that a lot of innovative products that are now in Medtronic actually originated in Europe. And a good part of that within the Netherlands. And he was, and we were also a little bit proud. Oh, it's cool. But the point is that, it ends up over here, right? And here's really where it's being scaled up, the impact is being made, the money is made. And that should not have happened, right? But of course, yeah, we have countries, we have all these splinters, and that really makes it harder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said, the one that you said that you disputed with ChatGPT, access to expertise. If you have it in spades, it makes sense that you'd be developing and innovating in that space. Because the human capital part of this is always, the critical link. If you don't have the ideas to build the prototype, however good the business model may or may not be, you still need to have a prototype to pretty much go to market.
But I think on the expertise, so I don't feel like we're limited, say, in our engineering expertise because we only fish in the Dutch pond. It's not like that at all. We have people. We're only 9 people, but we have somebody from India in our team, somebody from Portugal, Belgian people as well. And also we have a medical advisory board with 2 people from US, one from Harvard, one from Cornell, Australia. So in that sense, I don't feel like we're constrained. But when it comes to money and business scale, that's where I feel the constraint is.
Is it one thing interesting? I'd be curious to know how your tech transfer process works for universities and whether it's the same it is in the US. Interestingly, the valuation lab that we have as part of Millie really grew out of actually not something that the faculty thought about. It was actually industry in town came to some of us when we first came up with this title, Medical Industry Leadership Institute. It's very audacious, just American way, right? And so they said, if you're the Leadership Institute, here's a big challenge for you, which was, not just this university, Minnesota, but many universities have all of this fabulous technology on the cutting room floor, use the movie Hollywood phrase, and they just don't have the time to vet it, to see what would actually go on. So they said, fix that challenge. And so the way we approached it, there's a few faculty that did this working collaboratively, was say, what if we trained our own students, not just the MBAs, but others, to look at some of these innovations in a way, it's not going to replace the experts to do it, but at least the stuff that is sitting on the cutting room floor gets a look. And the students also get to learn how to do some critical thinking. We even have some alum of this program that's scattered around here as well. And it became our signature unexpectedly because there was such demand for this. And I guess the question is, like, is this the same thing in the Netherlands, where there's just there's so much innovation, but just it's locked up at universities and it doesn't get the vetting that needs to go forward?
I think you
Yeah.
have more.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with that. I think if we look at how the Dutch tech transfer process is organized, it's very reactive.
Mhm.
So typically you have entrepreneurial researchers, let's say the usual suspects, they find their way through the tech transfer office. I think up to that point, I think it's on average well organized to get it to a business case and get funded. But it's a very reactive process. And we actually had a US investor settling in the Twente region, which is the region where I'm from, with a technical university. And he always said the anecdote when he came by that every professor seems to have multiple Ferraris in the garage, but they can't find the key. So, and it actually got us thinking in Twente, how can we, like you've done, get a more active approach, tying into ChatGPT. So what we've done there is we've made use of a natural language program to actually screen scientific data and literature. This is a different enterprise, but it has proven to be quite successful in bringing to light hidden gems, because there are many researchers that don't care about entrepreneurship. You just want to do cool research, but those end up in publications, you lose your IP opportunity and the like.
Right.
So they are slowly but surely moving into a more automated way of doing tech scouting, and also before it's published. So we're uploading pre-publications, doing a first screen, you're still relying on experts, but then you can fill the funnel with the deal flow. What we do see, and that has recently been greatly improved in the Netherlands, so once you have an opportunity identified and you go through the tech transfer process and arranging all the IP and tech transfer agreements, that used to be in some instances not very founder friendly, I would say.
Sure.
But I think with the recent introduction of national deal terms, it has improved quite a lot. I think they took notice how stuff is organized at Stanford, for example. In all honesty, I would say we're far from there yet. There's much to be improved. It should be extremely founder friendly, in my opinion. But I think what Twente is doing in particular in doing proactive, using NLP to really get all the hidden gems surfaced. I think that's really a very nice example of some new developments that we have.
Maybe one thing to add, and sorry if I keep droning on about funding, but what I think is and I've seen some really good examples as well, but where you have, say, university or research institute with a lot of good ideas, and you start harvesting those ideas, etc., and then say you spin it off into a company. What is really, of course, the first step is the most difficult one, right? Because you still have all the risk, but to have a local fund dedicated to medical devices, because that's a very different ball game than biotech and pharma. I'm always very jealous seeing that people in biotech, they have one test tube and 3 PowerPoint slides, and they raise 30 million. Like how the hell did that happen? Sorry. Well, I'm not supposed to say that. Strike that.
There's a whole other vocabulary. But
Sorry.
that's
Anyway.
You're good.
Apologies. No, so that always seems so easy, right? Whereas in medical devices, it's smaller numbers, but it's very hard. And so if you have a local fund really knowledgeable about medical devices that is willing to take the first most risky steps, and then once the flywheel gets going, we'll get foreign parties or what have you on board. I think that would really, you get a lot more value out of these very good ideas.
We're going to ask questions from the audience, and that includes our Zoom audience. So now's the time to start to interact, folks. Or we'll just keep chatting. Sir.
Is it? Oop.
We're awake.
It works.
Okay, it does work. Just a little closer, excuse me. I want to add something to the tech transfer. You were saying this was quite a good process, and I have a controversial experience there. So it's not always good in tech transfer, and specific universities do worse than others, without name mentioning it. I think that's one remark I wanted to make. And the second remark about the investment climate I wanted to make there. I think your remarks were good in terms of there is a specific gap between, let's say, up until the first couple of €100,000 or so in that region is very doable.
Yeah.
And then there's this big gap. And there are a couple of Dutch investors who specialize on this. However, what happened then is that the government also saw this gap. And what they actually did is they gave these specific funds more money because to close the gap. What happened with that is that, okay, now we don't spend 20 million on 20 investments for 1 million each. We have 60 or 80 million, but they have the same staff. So actually what happens is that then they now invest 8 million per investment. So the situation for the 1 million investments only gets worse. So that's the irony of trying to close a gap, and actually the controversy happened, is my observation there.
And I also agree with your observation that some universities in Europe have their tech transfer process better organized, more founder friendly than others. So that is true. Sense is the best. So
please.
Obvious.
And now it's on the record. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
So what would you, I mean, I don't want to give you guys to give like tips to your competitors necessarily, right? But like, what do you think your peer companies in Minnesota, somebody who's at like Millie, for example, what do you think they need to know about the Netherlands, and what is different there and what is great there? Why, if they're looking at the European market to enter it, where would they go? Where should they go? Why should they go there?
Yeah. I think, and honestly, I don't know this area. So, I can only, let's say, tell about what I like about our ecosystem. It's very easy to talk to other companies, parties, suppliers, even competitors, and say, what are you guys working on? What are the challenges you see? And to collaborate. And it's always, mostly it's easier to collaborate with other smaller companies, right? But also with some bigger companies. And that in an area that appreciates technology, has a lot of engineers and smart people, etc. It's very small, so you drive from one end of the country to the other in what, max 3 hours, right? I guess you're not even out of state but here, I don't know. But so it's actually it's all very concentrated, and I like that. And the other thing is, of course, that for an American company, I think coming to Europe, especially now with Britain not in the EU anymore, as a beachhead, the Netherlands is a good base. Language is not an issue. Infrastructure works. All sort of the basic stuff is there, and from there, you are in Germany within the hour, etc. So if you have to settle somewhere, it's not a bad place.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think if you want to have the intention to move to Europe, I think use the Netherlands as a stepping stone to do so. I think there are a lot of regional incentives, and people here from the regional development agencies that can explain a bit more in detail. But I think there are a lot of opportunities to get settled in the Netherlands, and it can be a funnel to all the European nations. The EMA's headquarters there, so I think it's a very logical place if you're in MedTech or pharma even to consider the Netherlands.
I'd like to comment on this because I actually went through this process of putting the company in the Netherlands when I had the chance to put it here. The gentleman next to me here was part of that funding, as well as the Norrell Group and the Kempen Group, and we set it up in Maastricht. But let me preface this from the standpoint, maybe I should stand up. The name is Tim O'Malley, and I had been working with Eli Lilly, introducing the insulin pump from London throughout Europe. And Lilly offered to set up the office in London for me to do that. And previously I had worked at Cardiac Pacemaker, which was located in Maastricht along with Medtronic, and had a wonderful experience on that because the Dutch are, first of all, very understanding of American and American culture. Cultural noise will kill an international operation if it's not handled right. The Dutch were straight, they were honest, they were multilingual. Their engineering was every bit as good as any pacemaker we made here. So when the opportunity to put the insulin pump process in London, I turned it down. I said, I'd prefer you give the money to CPI in Maastricht because A, they're on the continent, B, they're multilingual, C, they're traders, and 4, they know how to service these things. And I can send a Dutchman to France to talk to the French homologation or to the German, and the same people can cover this. And they also know the US and the FDA process because they were trained here, and they're English and culturally compatible. And specifically, this is a tie of Maastricht. It's got the angel and the star on it. So when it came then to start a company, I selected, we had the chance to put it in Minneapolis or Maastricht. And the funding out of Amsterdam was from an American family that had both Dutch and American ties. We put it in Maastricht and had an absolute success on the development of the product. Philips came down and stepped in and provided components that we would have never been able to get anywhere else. The Leof, Mr. Boonsma, I've known here for about 30 years, came in and we had a very successful development project. We then decided to come back into the US because as the American hitting the US market, that was important. But we had no team in the US and we're a startup on a small budget. Short did very good, but I could have used a little more. So what I ended up doing was taking the entire clinical team from the Netherlands and moving them to the US for the FDA trial. So I took 3 or 4 Dutch people who had done the European one, and they folded right into the US culture. The physicians would come out to the airport to pick them up and take them home for dinner. And we're talking Johns Hopkins, the Joslin, Mayo, the top institutions, International Diabetes Center here. They ran an excellent 510K trial on this diabetes telemedicine system that we had. And we successfully concluded that. So that's just a person who has been on the front line and in the trenches. And if I was going to put a company in Europe again, it would be right back to Maastricht. I mean, it works. It's linguistic. Right now, I'm collaborating with the University of Maastricht on a couple of things. And so I don't want to belabor or take away from the panel, but sitting next to Short, he and we've talked about this process, and the connection to Minnesota is also very strong due to the history. So I would say that an American company should have to come to the conclusion as why they would not put it in Maastricht. And the cultural thing, let me just close on that. When I was working for Lilly in London, I arrived in Germany on the pump, and they didn't perceive me as an American. I guess with the name O'Malley, they thought I was Irish or London. And the German director of Lilly came to me, and before he asked my name or anything, the first thing he said is, "Does anything good ever come from London?" And he meant it. Now that changed, but there's these rivalries within Europe, and whatever the case, you should look in a bicultural area like Alsace-Lorraine, because otherwise you become a German company or a French company, and you pull in that attitude. And the nice thing about the Dutch company is the Dutch, again, have this ability to go out. They're a small company, they have to interface. And their ability to interface with the multiple cultures was unrivaled. Maybe only the Swiss are in the same basket, and that's much more expensive. Excuse me, I've talked enough, but it was a very personal experience and I lived it. So it's not a theoretical model.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, for these great inside words. I've got a somewhat more holistic approach in the sense that Maastricht is nice, but other places in the Netherlands also will do. That's for the audience here.
We do have a question coming in from the Zoom room.
How easy or difficult is India to establish manufacturing capability as part of your product development strategy?
Say the first part again, Jessica, I'm sorry.
How easy or difficult is India to establish manufacturing capability as part of your product development strategy?
I don't know.
No experience.
Sorry, no, don't know.
If I can piggyback on the last comments there. What can you do in Europe, or specifically what can you do in the Netherlands? I was thinking of even 10 years ago, when you've got TAVR, transcutaneous aortic valve or replacement, being developed in Europe fully into a couple $100 million in revenue before it even gets to the United States. But that was then and this is now. I'm on the board of, I talked to a number of medical device companies around the US, and they are all concerned about MDRs until about 3 months ago. And then they all just went, oh, good. They kicked it down the road and we'll worry about it later. We still have worries, but not the same kind of hard and fast rules that are deadlines that were coming up. You guys both mentioned MDRs, and that was a little bit of an aha moment for me. It's not just about the rest of the world trying to get into Europe, it's Europe trying to do this. So we've got an issue here in the United States that's raised its head again with ethylene oxide, and it's going to have impact on the medical device world if it remains as it is. But there's lobbyists in Washington that work for healthcare that are going to come to a conclusion that is better for the patients and still has some regulation on EO gas. That's a long-winded way of saying, do you have processes in Europe where you can have a say with the European Union putting down these MDR policies such that it would calm them down a little bit?
Yeah, what I know is, and I think the short answer is yes, but it's a very indirect, convoluted way. So obviously in different countries, you have industry associations, right? call it, if you like, lobbying organization, although that's not quite doing them justice, I think. But they obviously talk to their members, and then they, on the, say, the national political level, try to influence decision-making and policy-making. But then, of course, you go to the EU level, and there you are one of, say, 27,
Ivan,
and it gets even more diluted and far away.
we were talking to Medtronic, Rob ten Hoed yesterday. He's a Dutchman working for an American company. I think it's known here. And he's part of the organization MedTech Europe. And I think that's what you're referring to, because MedTech Europe is the body in Europe where the industry speaks with the government. The only disadvantage for smaller companies is the smaller companies are not part of this body. So I was talking to Rob about MDR just yesterday with our Minister of Health. And Rob claimed that the problem is over, as you said. The problem is over for the larger companies.
Yeah.
Because they have already claimed this capacity and they have leeway with their current product. So they can say to the notified body, okay, I had this product, I have your time there. I have a new product which is priority now, and etc. Smaller companies do not get these time slots.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for the smaller companies, there is still an issue. So I think that's what we're facing. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's killing small company. I know one Dutch medical device company who literally throws all their operations based on let people go because they can't get access to a notified body, so they can't get to the market. So that stops. And this is it's healthcare is such a highly regulated business, and rightfully so, right?
Sure.
Absolutely, but difference and changes in the regulatory environment can really drive business success, business strategy. When I started in medical devices, Europe, quote unquote, was easy, and FDA, they were a pain in the behind, right? And now it's turned completely 180 degrees. So, and it really drives, at least for smaller companies, it really, to a large extent, drives the whole strategy. And that's a bit much. Shouldn't really do that, I think.
So we're reaching the top of the hour, and I just wanted to see if there's one last question. If not, I wanted to a follow-on question I wanted to put in, but if there's any last questions online? Okay. So in part because now I'm closer to 12 hours to going to China. What's interesting is that at the Carlson School now we have a medical industry MBA program. It's actually graduating its third cohort of MBA students with a Carlson degree. They're all doing this valuation laboratory. And their goal, many of them are already working for Western firms that are in China. I guess the question I have in terms of looking at China as a market, how, given the size, but also given the ambition of China in that innovation space, how do you think the best way is to engage? Because even as we run what we do now, we look at early stage medical technologies, and me and some of the other circles have a struggle finding any innovations to bring to China because people are obviously concerned about IP. We're trying to source it out of China, which also raises its other issues too. But I'm just curious how you folks think about that as an emergent market or really growing market in its space.
Yeah, well, I think in our case, what we've done is we've partnered up with a reputable partner in Taiwan, with a Chinese parent company. So the ambition is, after we went through the TFDA approval, to really pursue a Chinese approval. And I think there are many concerns raised with China, and I am aware of those concerns, but I think we should also acknowledge the impact that we could have with innovation for the Chinese market as well. And that's for Lipocoat outweighs the concerns. And we are extremely and acutely aware of the IP situation in China. And we're doing our best to manage that. But I think the first step, and I think this is relevant for any new territory that you want to branch out into, is to find a good partner with whom you can do it together.
Yeah, I think, again, agree. Maybe two more sort of side comments. One is, I was actually talking to a a small company who is active in M&A, basically in medical device, was talking about valuation of companies in Europe and US.
Mhm.
And I thought it would be higher here. And they're like, no, it's about the same. He said, but in China, there the valuations are stratospheric. There's so much money there seeking investments. And that, of course, is, and then money talks, right? And the second thing is that I think whatever you do there with a partner, of course, but I think you have to realize that, and I'm generalizing here, but still, when Chinese parties invest, they do that for a strategic reason to, help develop the country to develop. And I think you have to be aware of that. And in many cases, it also means that you lose control of your destiny, at least for that part of the business. I think that you have to really be clear-eyed in that. And it can still be a fantastic business decision. The market is there, the needs are there, the money is there, but it will fundamentally change your control of destiny, I believe.
That's excellent. Final question? Wait for the microphone, sorry, please. Thank you.
Tom, to come back to this funding issue, when we decided for Maastricht, we thought we would be able to come back into the US with an FDA approved, a product that was in sale, in the patented, everything else in Europe, and could walk in and get funding. We found, this was over 10, 15 years ago, the venture capitalists in the US there was not in the Bay, in Boston, or here, any of them investing directly in a European company. In fact, some of their charters prevented them, their partners, from doing that. And we were then in the process of converting the Dutch BV into underneath a US holding company, because that was the only vehicle by which the American investors would consider investing in a European company, accepting that the HQ would remain in the Netherlands. Could you comment on the current status of US venture capitalists and their appetite to invest directly or indirectly in a European-based company?
Yeah, in talking to also US-based investors, I don't think, generally speaking, it's certainly not a showstopper. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking to them. I think they're pretty clear that if they would invest, they would want a clear US market entry strategy, boots on the ground here. And I would say at the minimum, what is it, a Delaware C Corp? Yeah, and that's sort of the minimum. And then sometimes they say, well, maybe then the detail, we need to transfer over time all the IP to the US. This has to do with, again, with valuations, liquidity, blah, blah. So, but it's not, it was not, in my experience, a showstopper. No, it's very pragmatic. How can we bring it here? Let's start with a small step and we'll take it from there. Don't know what your...
Yeah, the same. And even the US invested in Lipocoat. It was fine with the Dutch BV structure. They didn't even require a Delaware flip. So I fully agree. I think it's more technology driven. The opportunity is there. I think the rest of the legal stuff will iron out.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. We're going to wrap up this really just incredible session that we've had here. Just thank you both for joining us. I'd also like to just thank our hosts here, the folks from the Design Center, Will Durfee and Art Erdman, for just allowing us to try this out for the first time. We hope to try this again. And the next time we come from the Design for Medical Devices conference, and when we join Tom and I next month when we go dockside for our evaluation lab chat series. And one last thing for those, I mentioned the Val Lab, I try to go up the movie Glengarry and Cross, always be closing. We do have a special evaluation lab opportunity for those that are alumni or MBA alumni of any accredited school to actually join us in Cambridge to do a 2-week valuation lab program at the last 2 weeks of July. Limited number of slots. If you're curious how this process works, people in your companies that are like early stage professionals just curious to see what it is, by all means, Jessica, what's the Millie email? It's just millie@umn.edu. Just go MILI@umn.edu, and any questions, just send them there and we'll refer you on. So we're actually doing it at the University of Cambridge, Corpus Christi College, with partners of AstraZeneca, and several startups around the area, also visiting the Mayo Clinic in London and also the Crick Institute. So it'll be a really, really great engagement. Thank you, gentlemen. We are
Thanks, guys.
concluded.
Well, thank you very much.